Welcome back. All right, so we've got training camp in a couple of weeks. We've had a lot of players change locations. A lot of players in the offseason have found new teams, and with new homes comes some level of uncertainty. We can always look on paper and say, well, this guy should fit in right there. Look at this. This line is going to be great. This guy's going to be great on the blue line. Well, he's a really good goaltender. And then the opposite as well, where we look and go, that one doesn't seem to make any sense. What did they pick that guy up for? And sometimes completely wrong, right? Where sometimes the guy that looks like he's going to fit in really, really well doesn't, and vice versa. The guy who looks like it shouldn't work, it does. So we're going to go through all 32 teams. I've got a player for each team. You guys can let me know in the comments section below who you're looking forward to seeing this year. As somebody who watches as many hockey games as possible, this season's going to be kind of fun because a lot of guys have changed teams. Starting with in Anaheim, John Klingberg. John Klingberg, solid defenseman for Dallas. I think he overreached in free agency. Thus, he ends up with a one-year deal in Anaheim. But he's motivated and probably kind of ticked off at how everything turned out. So for Klingberg, I'm looking forward to seeing how he does this year. At the very least, if he plays really well, Anaheim will have a piece to sell at the deadline. And or if Anaheim stays in the playoff hunt, who knows what might happen, right? Anaheim's made some interesting moves. I went with Klingberg, but there's some other additions to this roster. I don't think Anaheim's going to be a pushover for teams this year. Now we'll go to this end. We'll go to Winnipeg because very often I go in alphabetical order and can get kind of predictable. So I'll go with David Rittich, Winnipeg Jets. Rittich coming off of his second straight down year. Again, we're looking for some motivation. The Nashville Predators not bringing him back. Of course, he played in Calgary, played in Ottawa. Now he's in Winnipeg. We'll see if that bounce back happens. Winnipeg needs to give more nights off to Hellebuck. He can't overplay Hellebuck. So if Rittich plays well, he's going to get his share of starts, right? All right, why don't we take a look at Detroit here. Player I chose for Detroit is David Perron. Perron coming off of what was a good season for him in St. Louis. Has to be tough for St. Louis and their fans seeing him go. Perron, this was his second tour of duty with St. Louis. Maybe he ends up with another one before he retires. But the signing by Detroit of David Perron shows Yzerman wants to get better, and he wants to get better now. And so bringing him in, bringing in Kopp, the moves that have been made by Detroit, I like them a lot. And so we'll see if Perron at this point in his career can continue to produce at around a point per game, or if we're going to see that drop-off. Detroit betting on not seeing that drop-off at this stage in his career. We'll go to Dallas next. Dallas, of course, picking up Mason Marchment in the offseason from Florida. Marchment coming off of what was a fantastic year for the Florida Panthers. And again, it's all about, so was that the real Marchment, or was the player he was before last season, where he had some struggles here and there offensively in the NHL, was that the real Marchment? And of course, if what we saw in Florida last year is the real deal, Dallas is going to be very happy. Dallas is looking for goals. They really need goals. If he is unable to reproduce that season, that's going to be troubling pretty quickly for Minnesota. For the Dallas Stars. Not Minnesota North Stars. I also want to throw in there for any viewers, yes, this is my Matthew Tkachuk reverse retro. I figured it works because for Florida, it is going to be Matthew Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk coming off of a career year. Does that translate to Florida as well? Now, Florida has an excellent attack, but it is a matter of Tkachuk having that chemistry with the players and finding that quickly. He's going to want to reproduce another 100-point season, signing a long-term extension in Florida. He's going to want to go out there and produce for that contract. Tkachuk doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's going to have like this long-term extension signed and then just kind of, I don't know, coast from there. We've seen that where players sometimes get a big money contract and then they just kind of coast. They're not the same. I don't see that with Tkachuk. He only knows one way to play and should be a lot of fun to watch. Speaking of which, going the other way, of course, and so I'll throw this in here. Jonathan Huberdeau. Huberdeau comes off of a career year in Florida, goes to Calgary, signs a long-term extension in Calgary. Again, these long-term extensions, we can have the debate over which ones are going to age well. But it's really not about the 6th, 7th, and 8th years of contracts. It is about what's going to happen this year. Calgary looking to stay at the top of that division, to advance further in the playoffs than they did this past spring. And if they're going to, Huberdeau has to be, he doesn't have to get 115 points, which he had last year, same as Gaudreau. But he does need to bring that intensity. He does need to be consistent. And he needs to give them the kind of play that I know Huberdeau can. And so we'll see how things go for him in Calgary this year. Which brings me to Columbus, because these are all connected. Can't argue they're not connected. Absolutely are. And that's Johnny Gaudreau going to Columbus. You got Jonathan coming in, Johnny leaving. First names are similar. And I expect Huberdeau to be able to reproduce Gaudreau's productivity. Huberdeau a little bit more well-rounded of a player, but Johnny Gaudreau going to Columbus should be a boost for Columbus and for that market, because, again, we had the discussion for years about why nobody wants to play in Columbus, which I've done videos on how that's not exactly true, but I understand why that narrative is out there. There are certainly core players for Columbus that have signed to stay there. But, Gaudreau's going to try to show that, you can sign in Columbus and thrive. So he'll be doing everything he can to keep them relevant as long during the season as he can. Coming down to Ottawa. Alex DeBrincat, leaving a rough situation in Chicago where everything's kind of getting, everything must go, right? It is really a kind of a clearance sale right now with the Ottawa, or with Chicago. So Ottawa, they benefit from this. They pick him up in a trade that I was stunned by when it took place, and I still think it's a fantastic trade for the Ottawa Senators. I don't know if he scores 40 in Ottawa, but if he scores 35, they're going to be quite happy. If Josh Norris can follow up last year with another really good year, Ottawa won't have many troubles getting the puck in the back of the net. But, DeBrincat, huge pickup for them. Over on this side to Philadelphia, and this is a team that, of course, the fan base is not entirely happy with their general manager, Anthony/Tony DeAngelo, being added to Philadelphia. I like him as an offensive defenseman, and if he can keep himself out of trouble, I think he's a good addition for the Philadelphia Flyers. And he had a year with Carolina where he kept himself out of trouble. So there is a recent track record to say, hey, he can go out there on the ice, and the off-ice stuff may not be an issue. And so, DeAngelo for Philadelphia. It'd be fascinating to see how that one turns out. Going to Montreal. Evgeny Dodonov. Dodonov was traded twice by Vegas. Once officially to Montreal. The other one was nullified to Anaheim because it was on his no-trade list. So Dodonov going to Montreal, he's got to be, on some level, as nice of a guy as he is, got to be a little bit perturbed, right? Like, they traded him, then he comes back. He gets enough goals to keep them within shouting distance of the playoffs. He was the one player who was scoring goals for them down the stretch. And then they trade him again. So he has proven he's worth the money, but he gets moved because Montreal picks up that contract. Of course, Shea Weber's contract goes to Vegas. But for Dodonov, we'll see what he does this year and how motivated he is. He's probably kind of ticked off. So that might equal some more goals for Montreal. Might give him more value at the trade deadline. Montreal could win 2 trades in this one. Going to Vegas, a team that does not have cap space. So they have to get creative. And so they get Phil Kessel to come in on a bargain contract at $1.5 million. There's really no risk to that. Kessel, too, saying that the 8-goal season he just had, that's kind of a mirage. It was a bad year. And just shrugging it off, saying that's not going to happen to him again. We'll see. It was a rough year for him in Arizona. He had opportunities. He just didn't have it last year, so we'll see if he has it back this year. Going to Arizona. Arizona, not a team that's picked up a lot of players, but Zach Kassian's an interesting one. At points in time in his career, he's shown a little bit of top 6 upside. He's going to probably get some top 6 minutes in Arizona because they're still looking for, number 1 draft picks and prospects and all that stuff. So we'll see if Kassian has a decent year offensively. Now, I'm saying decent, I'm talking like 15 goals, right? I'm not talking like Cassian breaking through and getting 25, 30 goals. Not crazy. Those days, any hope he had for being a 25 goal scorer, probably gone. But I could see 12 to 15 from Cassian in a good year, and I could see him around the 40-point mark. Again, depending on where he's deployed and how well he adjusts to being in Arizona. We saw with Travis Boyd last year that if you embrace the opportunity and you go out there and you play your game, Boyd had a very good year for Arizona, parlayed that into a good contract extension. So we'll see how Zach Cassian does in Arizona. It's really all about attitude when you end up being sent to the Coyotes. Pittsburgh. As the NHL gets younger, Pittsburgh says no thanks. And this is one of the reasons why when I was talking about pressure to win a Stanley Cup, I had Pittsburgh high on the list. They pick up Jeff Petrie. You don't pick up a defenseman in his mid-30s who's on a relatively expensive contract because you don't intend to try to win another Stanley Cup. You don't keep Malkin, you don't keep Letang if you don't intend on winning another Stanley Cup. You just save the money. You say, all right, well, we're going to do like either a retool or a rebuild, but Pittsburgh's not there yet. And so the pressure is there. That they have spent a lot of money. And yes, the players have won Stanley Cups. The current general manager, Ron Hextall, has not. So for Hextall, he didn't win those cups in Pittsburgh. He'd like to win a Stanley Cup ring as a Pittsburgh Penguin GM. So yeah, he is definitely hoping, fingers crossed, that that's going to happen. We'll see how things turn out for Pittsburgh. Let's go to the Oilers. The Oilers, of course, one of the many teams to make a change in net. You're going to see a lot of goaltenders on this list. And Jack Campbell should be one of the higher profile early to start the season. Will get a lot of scrutiny because of his contract, because of how much money is involved. And the Oilers, you're in a pressure cooker with the Edmonton Oilers. Maybe not as much as in Toronto, but still the pressure is going to be there for Campbell, especially with an Oilers team that one of the reasons why they were unable to get past Colorado, there were a few reasons, but one of them was the goaltending was not as solid at their end of the ice as it was at the Colorado end of the ice, where oddly enough you had Darcy Kemper, who is now the addition I want to talk about for the Washington Capitals. So again, we're into a goaltending area of this video. Darcy Kemper wins the Stanley Cup ring in Colorado. But Colorado understands you don't have to have fantastic goaltending. You just have to have good, competent goaltending. And that's really what they had this past year with Kemper, with Francouz as well, right? In the playoffs, I didn't think Kemper played as well as he did during the regular season, which is partly because he had a really good second half of the regular season. And they didn't really need, again, they didn't need him to be fantastic. So what the Oilers are hoping for is to create a situation where Campbell can be good, not necessarily fantastic. And if they meet Colorado again in the playoffs, maybe they've got a shot. Now, one reason they might have a shot is in the event that Colorado's addition that I've got on the board here doesn't pan out. Alexander Georgiev has had some ups and downs along the way, coming out of the New York Rangers organization. Definitely a player who looks like he should get starter minutes at some point. Now that point may have arrived. But Francouz is no slouch in net either. So that's a decent tandem. I would say each goaltender could play 41 games. Might be that situation. Sort of like what we've seen with the Islanders the last few years. Maybe we see that with Colorado. But Georgiev, good young goaltender. And we'll see how he does, whether or not he thrives behind a Colorado team that won the Stanley Cup last year. So that definitely helps, right? But speaking of goaltenders and Stanley Cups, Toronto added 2 goaltender Stanley Cups by adding goaltender Matt Murray. He won 2 Stanley Cup rings as a rookie for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Played a very important role in both of those Stanley Cups. And that's kind of what they're banking on. It's not just the Sioux connection, I wouldn't think, with Kyle Dubas. But if Matt Murray rediscovers his game, and if he can get Toronto out of the first round, if he can get them anywhere in the playoffs, Dubas ends up looking like a genius. So this is one of those things where you have to be kind of torn. If you're a Toronto fan that's like, I hate Dubas and I want him gone. If Matt Murray has a big bounce back season, he's probably not going anywhere, right? Dubas is probably sticking around. So do you root against your own team? It's one of those things I can't get there. I can't root against a team I cheer for because of a general manager. So that's where we're at. But if Matt Murray has the bounce back season that Toronto thinks he can, they're going to end up looking really smart. Moving on to Seattle. I want to talk a bit about Seattle here. They're a team that definitely needed to improve their defense, their goaltending, but they had problems scoring goals as well. Adding Oliver Bjorkstrand should help with that. Bjorkstrand, excellent forward, 20-25 goal scorer. Should be a 20-25 goal scorer for Seattle as well. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be. So Bjorkstrand, I think a really solid addition. And in part because Gaudreau signs here, Bjorkstrand's available. Seattle has the cap space. They pick him up. They also sign Burakovsky. And that's how you weaponize cap space. That's what you use it for. It's not to intentionally lose. It's because you have that cap space that you can then go out and get these players for very little. They added Bjorkstrand for not nothing, but close, right? So this is really going to be an important season for Bjorkstrand. And, I mean, Seattle wants to get better in that second year. All right, San Jose. So San Jose might be a team that finishes pretty far out of the playoffs, but Oscar Lindblom, if he can bounce back, Lindblom could be a huge addition for the San Jose Sharks. I really think that Lindblom, if he can bounce back and rediscover his scoring touch, that could be quite the story. And one of those stories that would make Flyer fans go even more crazy than they already are, because they weren't that happy with the buyout when it took place with Lindblom. I understand why Philadelphia did the buyout. There's some guts there, but there's a lot of risk too. And so we'll see if he does have that bounce back with San Jose. We'll go down to Vancouver. So this might be a contract that comes back to bite Vancouver. I don't think so. I mean, I look at Ilya Mikheyev's deal, and I don't think it's that high. It's high. I'm not going to argue that it's not a little bit higher than I would be comfortable with, but for Mikheyev, I think this is a deal that now, he can go out there, and if he can score 20-25 goals for Vancouver, I don't think Canuck fans are going to be all that upset about it. But it also means that we may have 3 scoring lines with Vancouver. I don't remember the last time that happened. So I'll go back to some goaltending here. We'll get to New Jersey. Vitek Vanacek. New Jersey, one of their major problems this past season that led to everything just falling apart was they had to play, 8 different goaltenders? It's not a recipe for success. A lot of injuries in the net and just constant turnover, right? So adding Vanacek means Nico Daws gets another year in the AHL, which he needs. I think Nico Daws is going to be long-term the starter for New Jersey. But Vanacek coming in, I thought he was the better of the 2 goaltenders in Washington this past season. And I think he can give New Jersey pretty good goaltending. Again, they're going to be hoping that the injury bug leaves their goaltenders alone this year. That's really important. Carolina. In losing DeAngelo, that was a problem. But they had cap space, and they used it to get Brent Burns out of San Jose. San Jose wanting to clear up clear up a little bit of cap space, as well as, I think, get clarity on the blue line. So San Jose now, the blue line belongs to Erik Karlsson. Brent Burns going to Carolina would be to answer the fact that Anthony DeAngelo / Tony DeAngelo has moved on to Philadelphia. So Brent Burns coming into Carolina, he is on the older side when it comes to even from a defenseman perspective, but he can still score. He still has the ability to put the puck in the net and to pass it to the other guys who do that as well. So I like this move a lot. I think that Brent Burns should fit, but again, that's why it's interesting in the offseason to look at this and say this team won the offseason and then regular season shows up. It's not necessarily the case. For LA, I went with Kevin Fiala. Kevin Fiala coming off of a really good year for the Minnesota Wild. Can he follow that up? Can he live up to that contract? There's risk with that contract. There's also risk that if you look at his career point per game average, it's not that high, comparatively speaking, with the season he just had. So if he falls back to his average, that contract's going to look pretty pricey. But LA, wanting to go out and get a goal scorer, they did that. They went out and got him. And so, they're confident, and we'll see how Fiala fits in that top 6. Now, with Minnesota, not really a lot of additions because of the cap issues they have. So I'm picking Sam Steele, who just signed a couple of days back. Steele, of course, coming over from Anaheim, they didn't qualify him. So as an unqualified restricted free agent, he became an unrestricted free agent. And so there may be a chip on his shoulder this year. Maybe he's going to show a little bit of fire, a little bit of fight because, a team gave up on him. And he's young. He can still turn things around. Going to St. Louis. Not a lot of additions with St. Louis either. So for St. Louis, I picked Thomas Greiss. Greiss is on the older side with goaltenders. It'll be interesting to see with Binnington and Greiss how this works out because Husso was their best during the regular season last year. He, of course, has moved on to Detroit. So Greiss probably needs to play 30, maybe 35 games. Binnington had a good playoff till he got hurt. But can Binnington find that in the regular season? Can he get back to being one of the better goaltenders? We'll find out this year. Should be very interesting. For Tampa Bay, just to close out this column here, not a lot in terms of the additions. And again, the salary cap will make that a problem for Tampa. They'll have to, improve and add guys from within. But Philippe Myers, who comes in and signs a contract with the team, I think his expectation is he's going to play. And he's coming off of a down year. So we'll see if he has that bounce back in Tampa Bay. Would not be the first defenseman to do that. Zach Bogosian comes to mind as one that was kind of, tossed aside. And then he goes to Tampa and things are pretty good in Tampa. So we'll see if that is in fact the case for Myers as well. Again, as always, I wish him the best. It's not easy to be an NHL player. Honestly, I have no ill will towards hockey players. It's a tough league. New York Rangers, who had their share of losses. But picking up Vinny Trocheck, I think, was a very smart move. His point totals may not be where people might want them to be, but he's a very good player. With or without the puck, I've been a Trocheck fan for quite some time now. Really since he got to Carolina, and I really got more regular viewings of his game. I became more of a fan. Trocheck's one of those guys that the more you see him play, the more you like his game. So I think Ranger fans are going to be quite happy. Sure, it sucks they didn't keep Kopp, but I think Trocheck will make that pain go away. Boston, not a lot of additions with Boston. Obviously the return of David Krejci is going to be one to watch. But I'm going with Pavel Zacha, young forward, and in the event that, let's say, Krejci has some struggles, Zacha may be counted on to do a little bit more. Zacha, of course, never really hit his stride in New Jersey. That's how he becomes available. Also, as a restricted free agent, Boston was able to come to terms with him. So we'll see an interesting turn with Zacha. Does he hit that next level with Boston, or does he continue to be in that middling range? We'll know pretty early on in the season, I would think. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how things go there. With Buffalo, another goaltender. The Buffalo Sabres, adding Eric Comrie, we may look back a year down the road and say, that was brilliant. Buffalo has had hit and miss with goaltenders, right? Ullmark was a hit, and then, of course, he leaves and signs in Boston. Carter Hutton, that contract ended up being a miss. Of course, last year they had Aaron Dell. Dell's now in San Jose. I mistakenly said that he had retired, and what I was thinking of was Carter Hutton, so I mixed them up. And of course, Craig Anderson's there too, but Anderson in his early 40s, Comrie may end up playing a lot. He may end up being the starter. If he can replicate what he did in Winnipeg last year, that should be pretty good. But he's never really had that workload in the NHL, right? He's never been a starter. So it'll be interesting to see if he can follow up last year with another good one. So Chicago, a team that is jettisoning players, and they're likely to jettison both Taves and Kane. I'm going with a goaltender for them too. Peter Mrazek might play a ton. Mrazek might play a ton for them this year. And so they're going to be looking for a bounce back off of what was a down year for Mrazek in Toronto. And he's had his struggles along, and I think of Carolina too. He had ups and downs in Carolina. He's probably going to be facing a shooting gallery. Chicago's stripping things down. He may be facing a shooting gallery. And again, it's about, for players who are on these teams that are outside the playoffs, you are trying to increase your value so other teams will be looking at you to pick you up later. So that's kind of how Mrazek should approach this. Like, okay, Chicago, rebuilding, all this fun stuff. But if I can go out there and play my game, other GMs will notice, and that interest will pick up, and who knows, maybe I end up with another team at the deadline kind of thing, right? Nashville, kind of a through line here. Spelled Cavan. Why Cavan? You know, it's his last name. because I'm thinking Lankinen. So Kevin Lankinen, goaltender I liked in Chicago. He moves on to Nashville. He takes the role Riddick had. Lankinen needs to be able to give more nights off to Saros than Riddick did last season. That's the long and short of it. If Lankinen can do that, he's won himself a job for a while. I like Lankinen. Did not have a great year in Chicago. Who did? Okay, DeBrincat did, and Kane did. Again, I would say Caleb Jones had a pretty good year. But Lankinen, if he can bounce back, and I think he's capable of doing so, could end up being a pretty good pickup. Nashville needs to give Saros more nights off and, have that 1-2 punch. And even if you're not of the belief that you don't have to give the starter more nights off, because I've seen that argument about, well, why can't a goaltender play 60 games? You need to have two good goaltenders. The idea of just that one starter and who cares about the backup, those days are gone. So you need to have two goaltenders you have faith in. Lankinen needs to be that guy. And look out for Connor Ingram, because during the training camp part of things and preseason, Ingram's going to be trying to stay on the team and make this decision as tough as possible. And last but not least, the New York Islanders. Makes sense to have them last, right? Because very often the Islanders make those moves last. Alexander Romanov. The one addition, really. The Islanders not big on additions this past offseason, or this offseason. We're still in the offseason. Romanov is going to be interesting. I liked him a lot in Montreal. I was very surprised they parted with him because I think there's a lot of potential there. The Islanders might be able to help him realize that. They've done a good job with their defensemen. Generally, their defensemen develop really well. Pelech, Pulock, those two come to mind quickly, as does Dobson. Dobson hit his stride this year. So if they can get him into that kind of a category, he's physical. He's good. I think he's good defensively. I know he had a rough year last year. I think he's good defensively. And I think on the offensive side, there might be a little bit more there than we've seen so far. So we'll see. So there you go. Did I get all 32 this time? I did. I didn't last time I did this video. I got 31, finished the video, and then went, well, shoot. Now I have to start over. So here we are, take two, and I got all 32 this time. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always. Who are you most looking forward to seeing play on a new team this year? Which one are you excited about? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.